So,
Very good.
great to have you here. Thank you very much for the Portugal Club this evening. And we have Jim White with us live from Porto this evening. Good evening to you, Jim. How are you doing?
Good evening. Good to see everybody.
You are our extraordinary expat, Jim White, in Porto, as we can see on the screen there. Can you tell us a little bit about your story, your background, Jim, and your journey to Portugal?
Yes, I would. I'm living in Baltimore when COVID hit. Both my business and my wife's business, like many folks, kind of shrank and kind of began to go away and to move to online. And we began to think about also at this age and stage, where might we be? I teach and run workshops, and Mandy teaches yoga and teaches art classes, and a lot of it could go. We discovered that we could go online with it, and began thinking where. And we weren't being held tightly by lots of connections in the U.S. that kept us there. And we looked around, and Portugal kept coming up, and Portugal kept coming up. International living. Oh, look, Portugal. And so we began to dream about that, and then got in touch with Good Morning Portugal from there, and then also a couple of other Facebook groups, and began to imagine what it would be like to do that, and then moved into the horrors of the D7 visa and the selling of the house, and the thing that would make many of us go a little bit crazy when we get into that kind of detail for things.
Yeah.
And so we arrived in Peniche, actually, in about 1 year ago last week, stayed 2 months in Peniche, and then came up to Porto, found a place, and we've been here since February. And we love it. We really love it.
I'm so glad to hear that punctuating the end of the story with we absolutely love it. So it went. I mean, you say the horrors of the D7, and clearly that is a process that is daunting because so much of that is out of your hands and is a mystery until you get the right side of it. But it sounded like it was fairly plain sailing for you.
Yeah, yes, it was plain. It was plain sailing. The challenge of the D7 was that we were not all that organized to begin with, and that forces organization on all kinds of things, as you well know.
Yes.
And so it was moving into that domain, looking at selling a house that had too many articles and artifacts and tchotchkes and whatever in it, and also 2 cars, and think about moving 3 cats over as well. So it was a process that kept us, and this is attached to the now what kind of conversation as well, is that we were attached to getting ourselves together and focusing on, all the details and staying engaged with Good Morning Portugal and Gilda on EI. And so every time we would get down, we would get a new hit of a new YouTube video on Portugal or a new the show in the morning. So we kept ourselves motivated so that we were being pulled to Portugal.
Yeah.
Because getting out was cloying. I mean, it's like you could, you could get lost in a well of detail. And if you don't come up for air, at least for us, and get some inspiration, it would have been hard. So it was with smooth sailing, given the fact that we had something pulling us, as well as we really wanted to change our lives in the Baltimore area as well.
Mm-hmm. So some key takeaways from that. You are in Porto, which and I think fair to say you would be happy to be a reference point there and resource.
Yes, absolutely.
Porto. Well, thank you for that. And
sure.
You successfully brought 3 cats over. That's quite a useful bit of information as well. Have they settled in okay?
They've settled in okay. There, we have a horror story. If you want to hear horror stories, near ones, funny, ending well.
Okay.
We thought our cats, when we arrived, 2 were in the hold and 1 was in our laps, and we got there and we inadvertently went through customs, not having our 2 cats that were to have gone to the vet, but we didn't know that. Then getting back into customs to get our cats took 3 hours. In the meantime, we went to cargo because someone pointed us to, they'd be in cargo. And they said, the only thing we have had come through here are, the plane to Brazil. So we thought our cats had gone to Brazil for about an hour there in the Porto airport. until we figured out how to get back in. So that's something, if you're there and you're bringing animals, do know what the process is when you
Yes.
come.
Wow. And then they're perfectly happy in Porto now, which
They're
is
very happy. They're very happy in Porto. Yeah.
excellent. Okay, well, so let's have a look at this, the sort of 3 steps, which is very sort of basic. I started to write, how many steps does it take to successfully migrate, which ended coming out as how many expats does it take to change a light bulb, which I can't do any better than a post I found on Expat Forum, which is that long there, which you can read at your leisure later on. But it just kind of details what goes on forums hilariously when expats are talking about changing light bulbs. So the serious matter here is this, the 3 stages, which are what's what, which is really what you've just described, right, Jim? I mean, you went through the what's what, the nuts and bolts with EI,
Right, right,
expats Portugal, and gleaned things from others in a similar position,
right.
which is
Exactly.
helpful. And then we get on to the what now and the what next. Now, in your professional life, I know you facilitate people with these sorts of issues. And when I say these sorts of issues, it makes it sound very serious and psychotherapeutic. But you help people with transformation
Yeah.
and self development, personal realization in life. So these aren't strange themes to you, but on a personal level, would you describe yourself as reaching a what now moment in your journey? Just over a year in, am I right? Is that
Yes,
yeah?
it's yes, I am. I think we're both at a what now kind of moment, although there are things that are emerging which are part of the story. Um, that we're at, we did everything to get here, and now how do we want to be spending our time?
Yeah.
And I'm doing some online things, and I do some coaching online. And Mandy does yoga online. She still has U.S. clients who come to yoga class 3 or 4 times a week, 3 times a week. And it's so the question is how to get engaged. I know that we want more connection. I used to teach Peace Corps volunteers about adaptation to other cultures, and I knew the theory of it. And we could talk about, oh, this will happen and that will happen. I'd lived overseas a bit. However, coming here, um, just picking up and coming here and setting down sight unseen. We also came without having done any scouting trips. So we arrived and we looked at each other and says, okay, now what? Kind of that's we get to do a lot of things, but now what do you want to do? And things are emerging, and it's from the perspective, it's not a planned, organized, controlled, monitored, strategic plan, all of that kind of organizational stuff. It's sort of what's happening today and how does it feel and where do you go? So it's a nonlinear kind of way of figuring out now what, and
Yes.
looking for connection and looking for community. And so that's what we're doing.
Okay. And from your knowledge of people and how they tick and work and in workshop scenarios, facilitation and so on, how important do you think it is to have a what next, to follow the what now or now what moment, peak pastel donata, which is another way of putting it.
I think it's a dance actually between having a sense of what you want to, in this case it's how do you want to feel and how do you want to live into the lifestyle without having a plan. uh I mean, for us it's having, wanting to connect and wanting to be engaged in the kinds of things that we love to do, because I like to teach, and so I want to be doing more of that, and also sort of letting emerge what kind of wants to emerge in a sense. I've
Mhm.
got 3 stories of what it's like to start feeling like you're plugged in a little bit from the emergent kind of thing.
Mhm.
Um, the 3 little things that have happened is this is has that give us a sense of a feel for the culture and its warmth, which we've all talked about before many times. And the first 2 weeks we were here in Porto was it was August. It was Mandy's birthday, and I found a fado place like a block and a half from us down the street, and it's local fado. So there are it's the local singers who come in every week, twice a week, and do fado there at the cafe. And I went by and said, "Oh, God, want to do it?" The owner said, I said, it's my wife's birthday. Do you have cakes here? There, of course, there are no cakes or pies or pastries in Porto. So that was a big question. So, uh, and she said, I'll bake her a cake.
Oh, wow.
I'll bake her a cake. And we came to Fado. It was our first night in Fado. And and we, there was maybe one English speaker in the house, and us, and the owner came up at break and said, introduced Mandy and said it's her birthday, and everybody sang happy birthday.
In the whole place?
In the whole place. The whole place stood up and sang happy birthday, and the owner brought a cake out for Mandy.
Oh, my
That
word.
was one of the first things that we felt that, this is very nice. Now, it could happen in the US. Of course it could. Yet we were so busy in the US that those little things that pop up, I might not see, might not appreciate it, might not see it. So it was, so that was one of the stories that let us know that we do like it. Another story is Mandy went to a restaurant, maybe her first week or two out wandering around the neighborhood. Her way of getting it interacting is to go out and walk and sketch and find a new cafe, find a place and do urban sketching. So she found a cafe, and they brought her something she thought she'd ordered and it wasn't hers. And she said, oh no, it's not. And then she realized that it was on her, and she felt really badly about maybe offending the cook. And so she came back and said, I don't know if I can ever go there again, etc. I said, oh, let's just give it a shot. She went back. They were very friendly, and she ordered, and it was right. And then they came over, moved her purse and everything aside, and presented her with a large grilled sardine, kind of as a gift to her out of the blue. Just gave her this sardine. And luckily she likes sardines. So that was very
That could have been awkward, couldn't it?
That's right.
What a lovely gesture.
Yeah, it was lovely. And the other thing that happened that was very tender, and this, we're getting a feel for the place kind of thing, is that we're on the metro, which is about a block and a half from here. So it's magic in Porto because you can get around so much. And we're there, and an older woman with a cane is at the top of the escalator. And she's really having trouble navigating her step on that. And a young woman coming up the other side of the escalator turned around, caught her arm, and helped her go down the escalator. And at the end, the older woman reached up and kissed her hand and walked away. And just really so little things that happen that in my chronic over boogie world back in the US, I probably would have missed.
Yes, interesting. So I see how you've put that, which is very thoughtful. It's not like better or worse, is it? It's just the nuance of having the space to notice these things.
Yes, exactly.
More so. And they are beautiful, and it does feel like the country is, as much as you're reaching into the country or leaning into the country, it's leaning back at you as well.
Back.
Not just leaning, like embracing you with these lovely experiences there. And I feel a bit bad because it should be Extraordinary Expats, Jim and Mandy. But you tend to be the one in the limelight, and we have the conversations together. So I don't mean to exclude Mandy, but clearly she's very important in all of these in this process and the lovely stories you've shared there, Jim. Just finally, then, from the point of view of the what next, and when people find themselves, I don't want to dwell too much on the sort of negativity of the what now. But I think it's fair to say if one's experience of being in Portugal becomes a little bit challenging, and you're in that what now sort of space, and things, it's a spiral. It's not linear.
It is a spiral.
It's a spiral, isn't it? And if the spiral isn't going up, it's going in the other direction. And what I've noticed for people who, at times, or who, as it turns out, may return home because the spiral is downward, their experiences tend to gather, and they start to look for evidence even of the downward spiral. So this is a compounding process So it's
Very much so.
very important, I think, to reach out, to be aware of that. Like awareness is everything, isn't it? And find some way of having the spiral be going upward rather than a sort of a vicious cycle or a self-fulfilling prophecy of any kind.
Yeah.
You know about this stuff from your professional work, I think, and how the mind works, how people work, how transformation occurs, from the Peace Corps days, from your work.
Yeah.
And I know you're modest about this, but Jim is a world-renowned workshop facilitator. So much so that in being here this year, you were flown back for a gig, weren't you, to go and facilitate in the United States? And this is the
Yeah.
work you do, isn't it, Jim?
Yes, I facilitate workshops of many of them are personal growth, and currently I've done work as an organizational consultant back with the U.S. government as a consultant and like that. But right now, my work is uh, philosophically is helping folks take ideas to actions that change their lives.
Hmm.
And so the ideas I pull from are neuroscience and kind of perennial wisdom traditions and practices that are in the in the touchy feely world.
Yes,
As they
we
used to
own that.
say, as they used to yell at you in the '80s in the classrooms and things like
Yes.
that. Um, and so I really enjoy working with folks who are looking at taking their passions and turning them into something they can do in the world that's for a number of people. So part of it is, how do you design instruction and workshops and meetings and things where people come in having one sense of what they are about and what they want to do, and go out having a quantumly changed sense of what's possible for them. So it's
Wonderful.
working in the realm of, how do you help people determine what they want to be doing and help them find a way to doing that without giving any answers, because you don't have, you set the things in motion and people take care of themselves with a lot of it. But
Yes.
that's been doing that for a while. And after I had a heart attack in Singapore and decided I needed to change my life, and that's a whole different story.
we might we might come back to that in the Q&A. So I'm just making a sort of group mental note that you could be an incredible help to us, for people
Oh,
who do want to dig deeper into this. And I don't think it would necessarily be part of our every day or every week conversation, but it would
right.
be great to have for people who do want to go further into that and explore that. We could certainly have online, or
Yeah.
even, I mean, if we're all in Portugal, we could even have meetups to
Meetups would be
explore these
fun
issues.
as well.
So on a last word to you, based on the fact that you are a facilitator of life-changing workshops, do you think coming to Portugal in its own right is a life-changing workshop?
Yeah, absolutely.
Right.
Yeah, yeah, it is a life-changing workshop. And from the perspective of this, the now what part of things, and is really about what I'm discovering is that the journey of arriving here is an internal journey. To is getting sort of dealing with what goes on inside our heads when we go to the ATM and we can't make it work the first time. We ought
Yes.
to know this stuff. We're smart people, and yet I find myself flummoxed sometimes, historically, with different kinds of things that are more difficult to deal with just because I don't have the language. So the challenge is not about Portugal. It's not about the Portuguese. It's not that they're bad and slow and don't come on time and don't learn English or whatever one would say when you get down in that spiral. It's
Mm,
an internal journey of, what am I saying to myself in this context, and how might I not let myself go into that feeling. And it's the feeling, it's the self-criticism, not the criticism of the culture, that
yeah.
gets in the way sometimes of not being on that spiral. And there's some little things that we're learning to do about getting off that spiral, and we talk about it in Good Morning Portugal. James talks about it in terms of the kind of pause and breathe and then act. There's a physical process you can go through when you pause, and how do you pause, and then how do you breathe? What's the dynamic of breathing? And then when you move into action, how do you set intentions around those actions? So there's a kind of a science to breaking that down in terms of ways of taking control of your own thinking in your own
Yes.
mind.
Yeah, and thank you for that, Jim. And as we're beginning to see a community in which that can be expressed and discussed and worked with, Jim, thank you so much. That's a fantastic 20 minutes there,
so welcome.
and it will be lovely if anyone has any questions. Well, we have
Please.
Jim for this. I mean, it could be on the most mundane of matters,
Anything.
as in which restaurants to avoid in Porto, which
That's
Christina is
good
helping.
to know.